It just seems like everywhere you turn lately, Chicago's in the news.
Now they're flooding the cities. They're bringing those migrants right to the black community, the black and brown community.
So, Brian, our guest today is Pastor David Lowery. Can you tell us a little bit about him and his background?
Yeah, Pastor Lowery came to our attention through Project 21, and that is a group of right-leaning African Americans, and he's very active in the community in Chicago. He knows where all the bodies are buried, so to speak. He's got a lot of insight as to what's going on in that town, and I thought he'd be an interesting guest because it just seems like everywhere you turn lately, Chicago's in the news. Not just for the crime spike they've had since Lightfoot's been mayor, but also for the sanctuary policies they've had, which are failing spectacularly now that Greg Abbot has decided to send them some of what he's been dealing with.
So just so our audience understands his perspective, the pastor has been one of the lone voices from a conservative perspective talking about the damage that unchecked mass migration does to the African American community, but also the minority community in the United States in general. Is that true?
Yes. You don't hear that perspective as often as I think is out there. I think the legacy media would have you believe that the African American community is a monolith, that they're of one state of mind and it's supporting one particular party. And I think Pastor Lowery will put the lie to that today when we hear what he has to say, because he's got some very strong opinions that are not approved narrative that you see on the news every night.
No, I think that's pretty obvious. I think that the pastor is a champion of freedom in his political leanings, definitely go in that direction. And just to put in a plug, he did a show. He has an online show with our associate Tom Homan, which was excellent, that a lot of our viewers would enjoy watching.
Yes. We're talking today about Chicago, what's going on in this city, this once great city. And we've got a very special guest today. We have Pastor David Lowery, who lives in Chicago and knows pretty much everything that's going on there. How's it going today, Pastor?
First, let me give all praises to God and my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ for making it possible. And thank you for having me on the show. What's going on in Chicago? It has been a deterioration of the political party that's there, the Democratic Party. There's a lot of corruption with the state representatives as well as the state senators. You're talking about a governor that's corrupt. He's getting by the skin of his teeth with the comment for that they were found guilty for all the bribery schemes with Michael Madigan. So you're talking about a Democratic state that is being run in the ground. They have a super majority. And so they're just making laws and rules as they go along. And it's pretty much against the American people's freedom. So we have a battle on our hands here as the American citizens in Illinois. But Chicago specifically is starting to be inundated with the problem that we see that since President Trump was out of office, when he instituted Title 42, which will allow the American citizens the safety of illegal immigrants coming to this country and bringing diseases and terrorists and all sorts of health issues that's coming across the border now. But now that the Biden administration is in, they're trying to just completely open the border, but at the same time, they're trying to make it seem like they're really doing something to make a difference. So Chicago is now, since the mayor Lightfoot instituted Chicago a sanctuary city, just like some of the other black mayors across the country in the major cities where black folks live. They created a sanctuary city, and now they were begging for all these illegal immigrants to come to the city, and they were saying, oh, we got you with open arms. And now they're flooding the cities, especially here in Chicago, And they're not putting them on the north side where a lot of Caucasians live. They're bringing those migrants right to the black community, the black and brown community, and they're using old schools. Now, here in Chicago, when the move to change the curriculum regarding education for the black children here, Rahm Emanuel closed 163 schools. Those schools have been closed ever since his tenure. We, as an organization that Living and Driving While Black, we've been working in the communities trying to open some of those schools so we can start educating those black children who are not getting a proper education as we see it and as we used to be educated. And so when the migrants first got to Chicago, they were sleeping in the police stations wherever they could sleep. But then as more came in, the mayor decided that she wanted to open up some of the closed schools in the black and brown communities to house these people. Now, these different communities, especially in Woodlawn area, Wellborn, Gresham, all of these different communities now are saying, we don't want them in our community. But she did open up a school and put the migrants in. And the most sad thing about it is, how could you open up a school to house illegal immigrants? And we have people here in Chicago who are citizens who are sleeping on the viaducts, sleeping in boxes, not eating, don't have proper health care. I mean, these are American citizens. And what type of mayor are you? Would you bring in migrants and house them and feed them and clothe them and teach them and then give them the taxpayers' money to buy housing in the black community and at the end result probably opening up businesses in the black community, get rich? And that's what's happening here in Chicago. Mayor Lightfoot, on her way out, she deemed an emergency, and the money that was in that emergency pot now is going to be given to all the migrants. It's about 30-some thousand that are up here. She's going to start taking that money, and she's now trying to open up South Shore High School, and the people in the area are protesting. They're saying, no, we don't want them in our community. You need to find someplace else for them to be. And I think this is the result of the border problem.
Pastor, I'd like to watch this clip with you and get your reaction because it's exactly what you were talking about. So let's watch this, and then I'd like to hear what you have to say about it.
Plans to open what they call a respite center in the former shuttered South Shore High School have been finalized, but people who live in that neighborhood made it very clear how they feel. For city leaders who came looking for a conversation over opening the doors of a shuttered South Shore High School to migrants.
What's important is that we really establish that this is a humanitarian crisis, and we're here.
South Shore residents responded with resounding rejection.
While this crisis may constitute an emergency for the city of Chicago, it does not constitute an emergency for the South Shore community.
Incoming migrants have overwhelmed district police stations.
So what do you make of that?
Well, when the first migrant school was open, there was a press conference. And first, let me say this to the people of Chicago. We have let a person like Lori Lightfoot come to our city and destroy it, who never really had a love for Chicago. But this mayor has not been in tune with the community. She ran on the premise of saying that she wanted to unite the people of Chicago, north side, south side. She wanted to get the west side and the south side. There's places in the city where it's a lot of crime, no economic development. Her whole platform was to get black people to vote for her so that she could get into office. Once she got into office, she became very disrespectful to the black community. She disrespected the aldermen. She never really did anything to bring the two sides together. She didn't create any economic development. And so it was like a little tyrant that was running around the city, threatening people. When COVID came, they made a lot of bad decisions. They took about $300 million and put it into the McCormick Center, and they only had 5 people that showed up with COVID. So she has been abusing her power and the finances here in the city of Chicago, and it's rightfully so. She's gone, and the people of Chicago spoke. Now, when she did the first school, people got out and they were against it. But the alderman in the 20th ward, and this is why I say Chicago is in a bad situation, because we have corrupt aldermen here. The alderman, Miss Jeanette Taylor, you might have seen her on TV. I had contacted her about standing with her to be able to stop the migrants from coming in. Me and some other pastors are going to do that to support them. But she went to a meeting behind our backs, and she got with Mayor Lightfoot, and they paid her off, and they allowed those migrants to move into that school against the will of the people of the community. This time, it is the same type of process. She did not vet the people in the community. She did not get together with them first and do a plan, but all she did was got everything ready and then told the people in that community, okay, well, we're going to put the migrants in. And what you saw was that first meeting of when they tried to implement that, so as if it was just going to go smooth because she had got the other school, she figured this would be really smooth. But this is a very affluent community. They believe in, things going by the proper process. And so those people there, as well as the people from that community, because you got to realize this, the first school was a test. That was the test. And the citizens flunked the test. Now she's going to move to the next school. It's even it's a high school now, it's even bigger. She's going to take on more migrants. She's already opened up the emergency fund. These people are saying, we do not want them in our community. We don't want our taxpayer dollars training them, feeding them, and clothe them. We don't want them in our community opening up businesses. We already got enough foreigners in our communities right now taking a dollar out in less than 30 seconds that we spend it with these businesses. So they don't want that, and that's what you saw. And I think that this is all because of the border. And if you watch that clip, now there's going to be a press conference tonight at 4:00 over at South Shore High School. But if you watch that clip and you listen to that clip, you will hear some of the people in the background saying, close the border 2024. Close the border 2024. And that's coming from black people. So all the things that's happening in the black community across the country right now in the major cities are ran by the Democratic Party, and they're destroying this country.
As everyone knows, Lori Lightfoot was rejected by the voters, so she's in her final days as mayor. But the person who's succeeding her, Brandon Johnson, we're hearing some troubling things about him as well. I mean, what can Chicago and the rest of the country expect from Brandon Johnson?
Well, so I want the people across the country who watch this show to know the truth. She was a bad mayor for the city of Chicago. She didn't do any of the things she said she was going to do. She did not unite the people. She did not create economics in Chicago. It was always a big strain. So now we have an election. We bring Brandon Johnson in, and Brandon Johnson is no different from Lightfoot. He was an organizer, supposedly. He was a teacher that got fired from his job because he felt that the students was not getting the proper scores on the ACT test, and so he never gave them homework, so they failed. So Mr. Johnson became the Cook County Commissioner, which he never did anything there for the black community. But because of the fact that Lightfoot had messed up so bad, and black people were looking for a new mayor, somebody that looked like them, that would do what they wanted them to do. And Brandon Johnson fitted the bill. He had a lot of backers, the school union, but you can take a look at his picks now. He just picked one of the union teachers to be part of the chief of staff. I mean, he's filling Chicago up with the teachers union, and they're going to run the city into the ground, probably getting major contracts, but he's only going to be a puppet to the powers that be that put him into office, just like Lightfoot was. He will be no different, and I don't see the city of Chicago the crime stopping unless the people in the community stop the crime. I don't see any economics coming from him unless the people of Chicago stand up like they're doing against these migrants and come together and block by block, start their block club, start meeting, start getting to know each other on these blocks, and start putting forth an agenda that the aldermen have to follow. So the people start doing that, then we're going to continue to see the Brandon Johnson, because black people are voting out of emotion. They're not voting out of the values. And that's the problem that we have. And that's why so many of us who are black, who have awakened and moved off the plantation of the mind, are moving toward other parties, the Republican parties, liberal parties, but they're looking at other avenues because...
You may have seen that Eric Adams, the mayor of New York City, recently pushed back against Greg Abbot, the governor of Texas, and he accused him of targeting cities that have black mayors as far as sending migrants there. What do you make of that in light of the fact that what you said, that a lot of black people in Chicago are kind of waking up to the fact that these sanctuary policies are destroying the city? Is there any validity to what Eric Adams is saying?
No, because what the black mayors did in the major cities, see, we got a lot of corrupt mayors, and they worried about money. See, what the Democrats did when COVID came, they stole all sorts of taxpayers' money. I mean, they were fleecing the citizens, lying, closing businesses. A lot of them should be held as for treason to this country, as well as they should be held for crimes committed against humanity. But what Mr. Adams is doing is this. As you and I know, and the American people know, these mayors was walking around with their arms wide open, begging for the migrants to come. We got ICE here in Chicago. The mayor of this city is telling people that the people that they don't have to worry about ICE, because these mayors deactivated ICE, which would have been able to catch a lot of these illegal immigrants who are here causing crime. So what Mayor Eric Adams is doing is that now he's throwing the rock and hide his hand. He's been crying and begging for these people because they see ways to get money in these migrants that they can put in their own pockets. And so they never thought that Texas Governor Greg Abbott and Ron DeSantis, they never thought that these governors who are borders are being overran would start to send these people to the sanctuary cities that they say they were. And so when they started to get the migrants, they was getting all the money, and they was using taxpayers' money, and they was taunting old Dementia Joe for money, and now that it is being overwhelmed and Title 42 is closing down at noon today, it should be closed, then there could be millions of migrants coming across, not to mention the ones that we don't get to see. So what he has done, he's thrown the rock and hide his hand. He's begged for everything that he wanted. They gave it to them, and now the Democrats are crying foul that, these governors shouldn't be sending them up there. They've been sending letters to him saying, you can stop sending them now. But they still haven't quit getting the money for them, though. That's the trick. And so, just like Barack Obama now, there's a couple of things I want the American people to realize. There was a situation where about 85,000 illegal migrant children came up missing, separated from their parents. Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, and George Bush hired private planes to take illegal aliens out the border and fly them into the United States, and people don't even know where the people are at now. And I'm saying that to the American people because if you're a former president of the United States, what do you gain by helping illegal immigrants come to this country without going through the proper process? So the American people need to start thinking about these little small tidbits that we're catching here and there, and we have to ask ourselves why former presidents will be aiding illegal migrants to come to our country and use our resources, bring crime, diseases, all of that. And it is totally done. And I said it on my show yesterday. All of this stuff is being done under the Democratic Party. And to black people across the country who watch this show, it is time to stand up. We need to move away from the Democratic Party because it has not been conducive for us, our neighborhoods, our children, our livelihood. We have not benefited being Democrats. It's time for us to step away from that party. Take a look at the values of each candidate. And with those values, that's what you vote, not with emotions.
I'm Tom Homan. The Biden administration is reversing America's progress on immigration, reversing ICE's ability to deport criminal illegal aliens, reversing job protections for Americans, and construction of the wall. That's why I've joined EARLY, the Immigration Reform Law Institute. EARLY uses the courts to stop bad immigration policies. Join me. Support EARLY at early.org. Help win the immigration fight in the courtroom. Paid for by the Immigration Reform Law Institute.
So, Pastor, it seems like as far as Chicago's sanctuary policy, it's getting real now, because in the past, Lightfoot and other mayors could virtue signal about how proud they are to be a sanctuary city. But now it's kind of like the bills are coming due and they're having to make decisions and school budgets have to be satisfied. What is the sentiment there as far as, are people just done with the sanctuary policy altogether, or do you think there's still a lot of support for it?
Well, I'm going to read quickly an article I just found about South Shore. And this is how it reads. Sanctuary cities like New York, Chicago, and Washington D.C., once falling all over themselves to signal their virtue and welcome immigrants, are now calling for a state of emergency and demanding more money from the federal government. After tens and thousands of migrants, illegal migrants, have been forced upon the welfare system programs. It says, but resistance is important, importing millions new Americans whose first act on the U.S. soil to break the law and enter illegally come from Black America, who are sick of having our fight for equality in this country appropriated by people looking for a better economic outlook. Black Chicagoans of South Shore neighborhood came out in droves to reject the recent proposal to convert a public high school building into an illegal migrant facility, with chants of build a wall and calling the city council to task for making decisions about us when none of you live here. Black America's Southside resident took a stance against more crime from unvetted migrants, siphoning financial resources away from Black citizens and imposing unnecessary competition for jobs. And see, that's what the problem is here. We know in the Black community that once these people are in this school, they're going to drain resources, they're going to open up businesses, and then again, the Black people in the community will not have had a say about it, nor is the city trying to create economics for Black people that live in the communities. So it's really a slap in the face, what has been done with this Mayor Lightfoot, as well as Brandon Johnson. He's going to follow the mold. But the biggest problem is, when I read that about those residents screaming, shut down that border, close the border in 2024, I think that is a good lead-in for the American people, especially in the Black community, the state that they're fed up.
So, Pastor, you came to our attention in your role as a Project 21 ambassador, and that's a group we had a very good dialogue with. Tell us a little more about how can people learn about you? How can people get more of your content?
First of all, you can go to project21.com and you can find my information there. But more importantly, people can find me at TECNTV.com. That's the Exceptional Conservative Network, TECNTV.com. My show is called Let the Truth Be Told. We air Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. Central. That'll be 7 Eastern Time for an hour. And we talk about the issues that what we are talking about today. We bring a lot of information. We bring a lot of educational information. We try to inspire people to do better. We work with a lot of people in the black community. We work with a lot of the black stations. We were working with WVON, now one of our sisters, P. Ray, who will be coming aboard with us at TECNTV.com. And yeah, folks, you can find us there. If you need to talk to me right away, there's issues with we have an organization called Living and Driving While Black, where we work with people coming home from the prison system, getting them jobs, transportation, and housing. We also work with young people wanting to go off to college, like counseling them, helping them find money to get to school. We're just trying to be a civil rights organization that is for the people. Not like the NAACP, you got to have the special stuff. You can call us at 708-663-5262. I don't care where you're at in the country. You can call us, 708-663-5262. And also you can see us at TECNTV.com. Also, you can see us at rumble.com, DAVIDLOW 1057 is our channel number. And we're on Rumble from 6 Central to 7. So, folks, if you need us, you can call us. But I encourage you to look at the show. You bring a different dynamic each day. And I encourage you to continue to watch Dan's show, because there's going to be a wealth of information out east. And I want to thank you guys for listening, and God bless you.
All right, Pastor David Lowery, thank you for joining us.
Thanks. Right, that was some interesting commentary from a guy with his feet on the ground in the communities that are directly affected by this in Chicago. What are your thoughts after listening to the pastor?
Well, it's refreshing to hear from someone who's actually on the ground, who sees it every day. This is not a politician who's speaking to us from some ivory tower. This is a guy who knows and talks to people who are directly affected by it. And as you saw it, he's not shy about telling it exactly as it is.
Well, I think it's also important to note he's a man of God. He cares about people at a people level. I mean, he talked about causes that he's involved in, like a program to help people transition out of prison. So this is clearly not a guy who's a hater on any level. And to hear him say that he's concerned about this and the effect that it's going to have on Americans, I think it's pretty powerful stuff.
Agreed. So, Matt, I said that there was a lot of news coming out of Chicago recently, and we have a clip here I want to show you and get your reaction to. This is a reporter who's been very active in Chicago. He's basically been Lori Lightfoot's worst nightmare. William Kelly, I believe his name is, and he tried to gain entry into one of the very nice hotels in downtown Chicago that have now been repurposed into essentially migrant shelters. And here's what happened when he tried to gain entry into a public hotel.
Entering a $300 a night luxury hotel that is being used for migrant housing, with taxpayers footing the bill. Here's hotel staff confronting the journalist. Watch this.
Sure, this is entering there. Well, why not? Because it's private. Wait, no, this is a hotel. It's closed. It's closed? No, I just saw some people go inside. It's closed for... Well, why can't I come in? It's closed for you. Why is it closed for me? Why is it closed for me, though? I don't understand.
It's a private area, so therefore it's private. You're not a resident here.
Who are the residents?
Matt, I would not doubt that the staff of that hotel have been put under strict orders. Do not let anyone with a camera inside this lobby, because what do you think they would see if they went in there?
Well, I think what they're going to see is, and we've talked about this before in a couple of our other episodes, migrants misbehaving. I mean, it's just, I don't even know where to begin with this, Brian. So first of all, yeah, it's private property, fine. They can bar someone, but it's a hotel which operates as generally open to the public. So why are they excluding people? They don't have a sign in the door that says we're closed for business. So what are they trying to hide? And I think if the reporter was able to go in there, he'd probably find the same thing that happened with the Row Hotel in New York, which is a large number of recently arrived migrants abusing the property of an American hotel. They probably find people drinking and fornicating in the hallways, and as well as piles of clothing and goods that have been donated by generous Americans. And then, the other thing that obviously comes to mind in this situation is, why are these people being held in a $300 a night hotel? I mean, That's, it's at the lower end of luxury hotels, but that's a luxury hotel. $300 a night is, fairly steep. You're talking about $2,100 a week. One, how much is this costing the taxpayers of Chicago? But number two, we don't treat our troops that are departing for combat in foreign countries this well. They could have found a room at the YMCA for these folks, and they didn't have a spare National Guard barracks somewhere that could have been pressed into use. And I understand that they've also been using public schools, but typically when a city will open a public school to use for migrants to stay in, they'll bring in a contractor. They have these companies that actually make money off of state and local as well as the federal government for providing resettlement services for alleged asylees and refugees. And they come in and they transform these places. And they're probably nicer than most places you and I lived when we were in college. So, this ridiculous notion that these are somehow downtrodden, desperate people who need to be taken care of by the American taxpayer is ridiculous. And when you look at a city like Chicago, or you look at D.C., the number of homeless people laying in the streets, sleeping on cardboard boxes that I passed in the capital of the free world on my way to work today is shocking. And if we have that kind of poverty in the center of American power, why are we spending taxpayer money to coddle foreign nationals who we didn't invite to come here in the first place?
The other thing, and if you watch the rest of that clip, which we will link to in our show notes for this episode, it's not just that the city is paying for the fee to put someone up in a room. The reporter goes into detail about how what he did see in the lobby was stacks and stacks of boxes of light fixtures and other amenities that they're apparently bringing in specifically for this particular group. Who's paying for that? So it's not just the cost of the room for the night. They're bringing in lots and lots of other things. And again, these cities have fixed budgets. They're not like the federal government. They can't just print money. So where's all this money coming from?
Well, the question that leaps to my mind is, Chicago is actually more dangerous. It has a higher homicide rate than most of the places that these people are fleeing. Honduras, Guatemala. Chicago's been like a war zone throughout significant portions of the city. So why wouldn't Lori Lightfoot or the latest mayor want to take their money and put it into the police budget in order to try and deal with crime before they're bringing more people here? Then the other thing is, they bring in these folks from abroad and coddle them, but then they complain about the cost, and now they're busing a lot of these folks to the suburban neighborhoods next door, which is ridiculous. It's an indication that these kind of touchy-feely one-world policies, when they meet practicality, they just don't work. We do not have the money in the U.S. for this. They're up on the hill just a few feet from where we're sitting, debating about raising the debt ceiling and borrowing more money to add to the multi-trillion-dollar deficit that we have in the United States. And we're spending $300 a night on luxury hotel rooms for uninvited guests, where there's probably a 95% chance they don't have a legitimate asylum claim to begin with. And if they did, they could have filed that asylum claim in any one of the multiple countries they passed through on the way here. So this is just beyond shocking.
The one thing that might give people a glimmer of hope, I know this seems as bleak as it gets, especially in Chicago, but the clip that we have of the town hall meeting, whatever it is, where the residents are in an uproar about using a former high school to house the migrants, the people who are in an uproar, these are the core supporters of the political machine in Chicago. These aren't wealthy suburbanites or anything. These are the people in Chicago, the backbone of the voting bloc that gets people like Lori Lightfoot elected. It's getting real now because it's beyond the flowery sanctuary rhetoric. Now it's scarce resources are being allocated to one thing or another. And the people there do not like the fact that it's being allocated to people that just got here 5 minutes ago at their expense. So we haven't seen the end of this. This is just building this confrontation of priorities there.
Yeah, I think that's an important point to note. There are people that are coming face to face with the flaws in the policies that they've been supporting. The question is, are they going to continue to push on this, or are they going to do what happened with California? California is collapsing under the strain of all this ridiculous cultural Marxism, CRT, and irresponsible spending, and yet people leaving California in droves to go to places like Texas and Arizona that don't have these problems. But as soon as these transplants from California get there, they start voting for the same ridiculous policies that they voted for when they were in California, and it's ruining places like Arizona and Texas. So, is this going to be the thing that turns Chicago around and makes people get realistic about what's going on? Or are these people going to pack up and move elsewhere? They're going to head over to Milwaukee until the same thing starts happening there. And then I think the other issue is, does this signal that people in the Black community are finally starting to see that the Democrats do not have their best interests at heart? That's a possibility. And we think, this immigration issue is apolitical. It should be of interest to everyone who cares about the security and public safety of the country. But clearly there's one particular party that has taken a hard line on this and decided they want to erase the border and make it go away. And until people encounter that issue face to face, it's not on the radar for a lot of people. If you're in New York City, or if you're in a border town in Texas or New Mexico or Arizona, this may be first and foremost a part of your everyday experience. Of course, if you're in a lot of other places, and if you live in Western Massachusetts, or you're in Maine, this doesn't necessarily register. Now, Chicago's always been an immigrant city, but the immigrants from the third great wave that came before and after World War II, and the second great wave that happened in the 1880s and 1890s, were law-abiding people who built the city into what it is. This is a very different group of people. You're having people who don't have marketable job skills, that don't have the slightest interest in learning how to speak English, who are coming here and expecting to be given everything by the United States government. And that's just not sustainable. Now, will people wake up? Who knows? Or will they continue to, vote along traditional lines? That's a possibility too. That remains to be seen. But I think you're 100% right. It's a turning point. Something is changing. Remains to be seen whether it's going to be enough to fix the problem.
The good news is something is changing. The bad news is they elected someone in place of Lightfoot who might be more radical than she is. So out with one problem, in with a new one. It's going to be very interesting to see how this mayor-elect Brandon Johnson handles this, because it's not the same Chicago Lightfoot inherited. We're further down the road at this point. The sanctuary consequences are significantly higher now. So he can talk all the flowery talk he wants, but at the end of the day, he's got a citizenship there that's very upset.
Well, and the silliness in all this is, Chicago is a city that has a very significant minority population. I hate discussing minorities because I think we're all Americans. But the fact is, most of the people that are dying in these Beirut-like statistics that we're seeing come out of Chicago every weekend when the shooting sprees start are not wealthy Caucasians. They're people who live in the neighborhoods where the bad guys live. And, a lot of them are just honest working people who happen to be Black, Hispanic, Asian, whatever. And they're dying in droves, and yet you have these leaders in these jurisdictions who are claiming they're acting in the best interest of the constituents who look like them and with whom they share political party affiliation, but they're not. What the politicians are doing is they're prioritizing the interests of foreign nationals who only arrived here 5 minutes ago and have no connection to the United States. And it doesn't make any sense. I would think if you care about promoting the success of the African-American community anywhere in the U.S., Chicago or elsewhere, you wouldn't want to bring in recently arrived immigrants and stick them in neighborhoods that are starting to become livable, that were being built up under the economic boom that President Trump prompted, And I would think you would want to defund the police, because if you have a group of people that's becoming a victim of crimes at a statistically higher rate, then typically you boost the size of the police force to protect those people. And then you boost the size of the Border Patrol and your border enforcement efforts so that you're not bringing people in to compete for resources. And we're getting to the point now, I mean, there's been 7 or 8 million migrants that have come into the United States uninvited. Those are the ones we know about. We don't know how many have streamed over the border unlawfully under the Biden administration. It's one thing if you have several 100,000 people a year coming here, but we have over 1 million lawful immigrants, and we've now had 7 or 8 million added to the population. There comes a point where you start straining resources. I mean, there's only so much food we can produce here. There's only so much clean water that we can make. There's only so many public safety incidences that police, fire, and EMS can respond to. So those things, are all significant, and that we have to question whether we're reaching the tipping point, particularly in big cities like New York, Chicago, LA.
It's also worth pointing out that people on the radical left, like AOC, the rest of the squad, that they will racialize any issue at all. They'll say minorities are hardest hit, or people of color are hardest hit, but you'll never hear them apply that to illegal immigration, when the reality is they are the hardest hit, because a lot of data has been accumulated that shows how they're the ones who suffer in the job market. They suffer with rent to get housing, overcrowding in cities, or public welfare resources. They are the hardest hit, but you will never hear these politicians bring up that fact.
No, of course, because AOC is worried about ridiculousness like banning gas stoves. I mean, it's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. But that's the thing that's really scary about this, Brian, is you're bringing a large number of people into the country that are unfamiliar with the way we do things here, as you've got people in certain quarters trying to reduce the benefits that we get from automation technology. So they're rolling back the clock to make us more like living Little House on the Prairie in the 1800s, while at the same time they're stuffing the country full of people. And typically the response to that, the New York City subway system and the New York City trains got better as time went on. They didn't go, wow, we got a lot of people, this is going to mess things up, we got to go back to horse-drawn carts. And so it's just this absurd lack of logic that's being applied to all of this.
Congratulations, you made it to the end of the podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and share it with your friends. If you'd like to learn more about Early, go to irli.org. And if you'd like to support the show, go to irli.org/podcast. If you want to hear the audio-only version of this, be sure to check us out on Apple Podcast, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and all the other major platforms. Thanks a lot.